All right, what's up, guys? This one is going to be tough. I feel like 99% of you guys that follow me are not going to need this information. You're not even going to necessarily be able to track exactly what I'm talking about if you aren't really into Broken Arrow, but it keeps coming up too often. I haven't done a good job of really visualizing this concept to anybody, so I am going to do it. Now, the core concept of this is winning the air fight in the current balance of Broken Arrow, basing this off of my information that I have gathered through gameplay, hundreds of hours of gameplay, ahead of dozens of hours of gameplay with the early access press preview that we got with all of the specs that are going to be there at full release. Now, I am hoping that we are going to get another test so that you guys can try this out for yourselves, in which case you'll be able to test this a bit earlier, and then hopefully we can get some better data so that they can rebalance this stuff, because after I explain this stuff, and if you guys are actually paying attention, you will find out that this is correct. Everybody that has played the game, everybody, the playtesters that I've talked to, okay, granted, there are some devs and there are some playtesters that I've talked to that still disagree on some things, but the things that they are saying, I'm going to cover in this video. The core concept of this video is explaining how Russia is quote-unquote overpowered in winning the air fight. The core concept of this is winning the air fight, although not completely realistic. This is a realistic leaning game, or they're striving for realism in some capacity, and it is the 21st century, where air power is dominant. If you win the air and you are prepared accordingly, you should win the ground. You should, because you should be able to keep drones up to real-time spot and potentially even laze targets of opportunity, while ground support aircraft whittle down the enemy. Of course, you still need to be on the ground. Of course, there's a lot of other things that you need to be doing, which is why whenever I talk about this, I still say there's gameplay involved, and it's going to be interesting gameplay, and I don't think it's the end of the world. It's also why I'm not like screaming about it. I'm not saying like the game's ruined or anything like that. There's still gameplay involved. I've done a bunch of conversations talking about that, but I digress. The pressure points beyond that, beyond what you should be able to do with quote unquote air supremacy, is that are you actually going to kill the right units at the right time, which you can misplay. The ground game can be misplayed, but in most situations with evenly experienced and coordinated teams, winning the air is much more important than winning the ground, because winning the air makes it much easier to win the ground. That's a core concept that should be widely agreed upon, because it's, like I said, 21st century combat with the capabilities of all these airframes and things like that. If you want to argue differently, you can on your own time. It's not what I'm here to do, as I'm confident that's facts, that's well backed up and well established. Again, it's not all that matters, and it won't turn out the same way every time, and RNG is always going to have a say, but overall, the vast majority of games, if you win the air, you're going to win the ground. So with that established, what makes you win the air, aka achieve air superiority in Broken Arrow? Your planes and your AA side by side with your ability to eliminate the enemy's planes and AA. So what are the United States capabilities for air-to-air combat in Broken Arrow at its current state? We've got 5 missiles, 2 long range, 2 medium range, and 1 short range. The JATM, the AIM-174 long-range missiles, the AMRAAM and Sparrow medium-range missiles, and the Sidewinder short-range missile. No, I am not including Stingers, any of the variants of Stingers. You're very lucky if you kill a plane with those. Yes, they can still do it, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't have an effect on what I'm trying to talk about. Just a waste of time if I've been explaining it in this video. Now, the JATM can only be carried on the Raptor, of which you can have a maximum of 4 JATM missiles per airframe, and then 2 total airframes for, quick maths, 8 possible JATMs per deck. The AIM-174 is much more available with the same setup, but you can have 2 more airframes for a total of 16 total possible 174s in any given deck. So that is a total of 24 maximum long-range missiles for the United States if specifically playing a Marine airborne deck. Those numbers split evenly based off of if you do, like, let's say, a Marine armored or a SF armored. But if you want to use the long-range missile for the United States, you need to either be using an SF deck or a Marine deck. And if you use both, again, you get 24. Russia gets the R-37 long-range missile, of which can be placed on 3 different airframes: the Su-30, the Su-35, and the Su-57. The Su-30 can carry 2 on a total of 4 chassis. The Su-35 can carry up to 4 on a total of 4 chassis, and the Su-57 can carry up to 4 on a total of 2 chassis, for a total of 40 maximum. However, it is all one deck, it is all Russian airborne, and impossible to have all of that. Luckily enough for Russia, though, it's actually not a big deal because the planes, like the Su-57, can also seed and ground support at the same time as multi-role capabilities, which they're pretty damn good at. We'll talk about that later, but the cap off the understanding in terms of long-range missiles, or to cap off the understanding in terms of long-range missiles, Russia can bring a lot more and better airframes. Why is it better when the Raptor is the best? Well, because you're right, the Raptor is the best. You only get two. You get two. And in terms of pure capabilities, the Raptor ends when it's actually seen. All you need to do is spot it with something, and then that's out the window. Now, that makes sense in real life because it can be from, even beyond visual distance. It can be even over the horizon in some cases, especially with things like the JATM, and you're not going to be able to do anything about it because it's stealthy. You're not going to detect it. You're not going to see it coming. Everything in this game, obviously scaled down. So dogfights win. View distance is obviously a lot different. So again, striving for realistic or, looking for realism, but not realism. And then in terms of the Hornet, it's a Hornet. It is not a Super Hornet. So it's slower, has less CCM, and that's really pretty much all that we're looking for here. If you can't run, you got to be able to hide, and it's not hiding. So it's got to be able to run, and it can't really necessarily run because it's also slower. So Russia can bring a lot more on better airframes. The Russian planes are faster and better defended airframes than the F-18s, while again, with the Raptor, you can only bring two at most. So if only planes existed, and they could only bring long-range missiles, Russia no doubt has the advantage. It is not even close. Now, why might that be useful, you might ask, when that isn't the case? That is not the case with Broken Arrow. There's so much more stuff going on. So why, when there's medium-range missiles and all the AA to help, would that matter? We're going to cover that now. The AMRAAM and Sparrow medium-range missiles get super messy. They're everywhere where you can put them on everything. And the same goes for the Sidewinder short-range missile. When it comes to medium-range gameplay, there's a lot that can carry these missiles. That's not an issue. However, if you are in range to shoot these missiles to the point of likely killing an enemy plane, we're not just talking about quickly going in there and maybe get one off before you turn around. Well, in the case of the Sparrow, that's not going to work. You need to actually keep that target on your radar, which means you need to face it. So Sparrow's out with that. And then we have the AMRAAM and then the Sidewinder. But the whole thing there is it's less missiles and the timing matters. So again, if you only get so much time because you're just barely reaching the edge of your limit there, just beating or getting to the edge of the range of that and then having to turn around, that's only one missile, makes it pretty easy to either defend against that in terms of turning away from it, popping flares, whatever. I mean actually likely killing an enemy, which means multiple missiles on target, a proper fight, not just barely throwing something at a distance. Now, if you are in that situation with these medium and most certainly the short-range missiles, you will be within range of the Russian SAMs on the ground that are really good at one-shotting planes. So that is included. It's actually very vital. It is vital to the explanation of why Russia is what they are. It's not just the planes, it's the SAM missiles in cooperation. When it comes to the medium-range missiles, the Russians have the exact same problem as well, where if they want an effective engagement of a U.S. plane at medium range, they will also likely be in range of U.S. SAMs as well. So hey, you might think it's a bit balanced there. Although, Russians have a clear advantage in the fact that they have more availability and much more range for their top-level SAMs. The Russians have the S-300V4 with two 9-kilometer range missiles on a maximum of 2 chassis, and the S-300PM with 4 8.6-kilometer range on 2 maximum chassis. The U.S. gets the Patriot PAC-2 with 4 8-kilometer range missiles on 2 maximum chassis, and the next closest is 7.2 kilometers, and it gets worse from there. Quick maths, Russia has more longer range, better SAM missiles. Both nations have sufficient medium range SAMs, however, Russia has exponentially more in terms of availability and effectiveness spread across almost all of their decks, while the US gets armored or strikers if you want the good stuff. So what kills these SAMs? Artillery and SEAD, with SEAD being the most direct and the fastest. The way to stop SEAD missiles is with SHORAD, aka short range air defense, that are capable of intercepting those SEAD missiles, or turning your radar off so that you won't get shot in the first place. Gameplay and skill come into account for the radar portion, so keep that in mind, but we're moving past it for now. So what stops SEAD missiles for the United States? There's the PIVAD at the top. You can get 4 of those per deck, and they usually take 2 SEAD missiles to kill if they get hit for non-line of sight SEAD attacks. There's the Bradley SHORAD, which because of its armor, it will always eat at least 2 seed missiles, if not 3, so it's a sacrificial unit, and very good one at that. The Striker SHORAD can intercept with the gun, and it will eat at least 2 seed missiles, as well as perhaps 3, but I've had limited testing with that one in particular. Same for the new CRAM, except I rarely saw that effectively intercept seed. If I'm being honest here, I had 2 games where I tried the CRAM. It never seemed to do what I needed it to do, which was to stop seed missiles, so I took it out of my deck after that point. I never used it again. So it could have been bugged, but that's the situation that we're dealing with. I really didn't see what I didn't see what I wanted to see from it, so I took that out. Limited testing with the MML, but I have reason to believe the Sidewinder loadout will be effective against seed. It's just untested properly. Also, all Patriots can intercept seed missiles on their own, and sometimes this was actually tested. It's all that's required at times to stop minimal seed missiles. So when we get into the discussion about Russian multi-role fighters or multi-role aircraft where they do have some seed missiles, not necessarily 4, and definitely not if you spam them, just a Patriot missile launcher, especially the MSC or the PAC-3, is good enough. Staying on SHORAD, let's talk about Russia, of which they get a lot. Just a lot of SHORAD, and it's spread across all decks. Almost all decks. Very good SHORAD. It was one, realistically, it's one of the things that they focused on in their IRL, military, where for almost every SHORAD unit that's good at stopping seed missiles, they're fantastic at killing helicopters as well, so they're usually all over the map. It's very easy to want a unit when you're playing Russia that can either stop seed missiles or stop helicopters. It's just a coincidence that they do both of these things very well, very commonly. Now, the same can be said for the US, specifically the Bradley and the SHORAD, except you get less of them. So keep that in mind. Gonna continue. Hopefully you're getting the hint there. If you're not getting the picture so far, but you really should be by now, we'll continue. Then last but not least, we have planes that can seed. The actual airframes themselves. The US gets 2 seed missiles, the HARM and the sidearm. The sidearm it's a bit of a long story, short story, though. Yes, it can work, but as with most US tactics, you're giving up something that is way more useful, way more of the time to make room for it. So for the sake of brevity, forget it exists. And anyone that thinks it actually matters, especially now that we have the F-16s, get your head checked. Those Harriers are much slower, much less survivable than those other planes. Yes, they can bring bombs. Yes, they can bring Mavericks, but so can other planes. So that's why I brought the F-16s. We also have SF now, so if you want to do something from the air, there are other planes that can do what you want to do better. Again, something that we'll bring up later. So no, it's not useless, but for sure isn't a literal game changer in the grand scheme of things. So basically, we have the HARM, of which can be carried on 4 planes. The F-15EX, the F-35A, the F-16CJ, and the Prowler. The EX and F-35 can only carry 2, with a maximum of 2 airframes each for 8 total, both sacrificing their specifically very unique and very important payload areas, allowing you or disallowing you from bringing some of the most important weapons that those airframes can bring in order to bring a insufficient munition by way of just 2 HARM missiles. But again, if you wanted to, you can bring 8 total if you are using a US Airborne / Special Forces deck. If you are playing a US Airborne deck, you get 4 total. And no, I'm not talking planes. Remember the math here. We're talking 4 entire seed missiles total. So you have to spend over 400, most likely over 500 points on an EX to be able to shoot 2. So that means that you need well over 1,000 points to be able to shoot 4 seed missiles as just a US Airborne. And same thing goes for the US Special Forces deck with the F-35. Now, at a cheaper cost, albeit. But 4 missiles total, yeah, not great. The Prowler can carry a total of 4 on 4 airframes for 16, and same goes for the F-16CJ. So if you're playing a Marine Striker deck, you can have up to 38 HARMs. And no, I'm not missing one, actually. You can't afford to bring all 8 planes with max HARMs, so that's a lot of HARMs. Problem is, though, the planes you get them on are slow and have less ECM than their Russian counterparts. We're talking about balance here. On top of the fact that you are absolutely torching your air tab. And that is fine if you're working as a team, but when we take into account the Russian planes and their Russian capabilities, they can bring a hell of a lot more to the fight while being more survivable. So keep that in mind. What's also important here is the HARM missile has a range of 8 kilometers. If you've been paying attention, then you'd know that is actually within range of both of the top range Russian SAMs. So you will not have a seed run as the United States, if you are using those planes, where you are not in range of the Russian SAMs and you're not good at defending. Does that always matter? No. Is there still strategy involved? Yes, absolutely. But brass tacks, at the end of the day, the most effective thing at killing SAMs is seed missiles, and the Russians completely and utterly outclass the United States there. You might be asking how, and the answer is range, survivability, flexibility, and availability. Russia has several planes that can all equip long-range seed missiles, of which several can also equip bombs, air-to-air missiles, and or anti-tank missiles. So for the United States, when you see an F-16, you can see it's a seed most of the time, unless you're pretty new. And if it's a F-35 or F-15, then okay, you have 2 seed missiles coming at you. And that's unlikely to do anything if you have SHORAD. But as Russia, you can see a Su-30, Su-34, Su-57, Su-25, Su-24, or MiG-35, and you will have to guess whether it has seed, bombs, or anti-tank missiles. In the case of the MiG-35 alone, it can either have 4 of the most deadly seed missiles for the nation, or 4 of the most deadly anti-tank missiles for the nation when coming from an airplane. So you can either, if you're defending against this, keep your radar on and eat the missiles, hope you have enough to stop it, or turn your radar off because you think it's seed, and if it doesn't have seed, if it has those anti-tank missiles, you lose whatever it's about to hit with those first on your front line with those missiles, which could be a 400-point Abrams that is vital for taking or holding the front line. There is no way to know the difference unless you see it shoot a seed missile early. However, same thing goes for the Su-57, the Su-34, or the Su-30. All have devastating other munitions you should not let hit your front line. The Su-25s and 24s are just extra worries to add on top of that. They can have seed missiles, and they're also pretty deadly. They're slower, but they're less effective, and it's still more. It's still more for you to worry about. All of these planes can do whatever they want. You're basically looking at a sky of Russian planes that can do anything. So you just have to keep your AA on. And if you try to send a plane after them, they're gonna die. They're outclassed. In order to counter it from the air, you have to know that your plane is probably gonna die, and then hope that it takes some Russian planes with you. Anybody that knows the reality, the realism of those tactics, of this situation, of the actual, air power of the United States knows that that's fucking crazy. But I continue. In the case of the Su-30 and Su-57, these are amazing, very fast, one of them stealthy, great ECM planes that can literally do anything. Amazing bombs, the longest range missiles, the best seed missiles, and all of these planes can have more ECM than almost all of your US planes, making them more survivable just from one statistic alone. Depending on the situation or role, Russia literally has 2 to 4 different planes that can do it at a multi-role capacity, allowing them to have constant support in some way, shape, or form. Then at the edges, from seed to long-range air-to-air, they also have exponentially more longer range missiles on better airframes, all while flying over better AA and artillery that's most effectively countered by air from the United States that can't be used if they can't make it to the fight. I'm actually going off script here and mentioning this too, but some people are probably thinking, what do you mean? We have the HIMARS, we have the US artillery. I think I talk about it here in a minute, but I gotta add it in right here in case anybody's already typing after that. There's aim time involved. The best counter to somebody that is micro-marine artillery is air, because it's quicker. You have that bomber, or if it's a cruise missile plane or whatever, you have it ready to go. You start to see those missiles go off, because if it's behind their line, then all you're going to be able to see is when they're about to shoot. And then you have your bombs or you have your missiles going for that, and hope that the salvo that artillery piece is shooting is not small enough that it's not already on the move. At the top level of gameplay for games like this, that is the reality. And if you can't have your plane there, then you're not killing that artillery, and they just continue to do what they're doing. So, continuing with the script here, in conclusion, if you want to win the air in order to likely win the ground, as Russia, you get more longer range, harder hitting SAM missiles on the ground that you just need to turn the radar on and put some SHORAD, that's also great at killing choppers as well, by the way, in front of them. Then use your planes to kill the US planes, SAMs, and artillery, because you again have longer range, way more availability, and just in general, better capability for all of the most important high-level weapons in this fight. As the United States, it's not like you're left helpless here. It's just that you must eliminate their SAMs to even the odds, as that's your easiest route of eliminating something. If you want to kill a plane, plane, you have to have a plane of your own or AA, of which I explained you're outnumbered and outgunned in the air. And if they effectively cede, you're also on the ground as well. But anyway, that's what you can do. So at least if you're going to send some planes out there, you don't have to deal with their SAMs, and it's a bit more of an even fight. You use your HIMARS or M270s or both to cluster artillery their SAMs. Remember, don't use the ballistic missiles, don't use the ATACMs, don't use anything that can actually get intercepted, because that's you're wasting your time. So shoot artillery that can't be intercepted, and then again, you have less to shoot at you when you are in the air yourself. Then use stealth bombers to continue to whittle down the priority targets. If you concede defeat basically in the air and you just don't try to win air-to-air fights, it's in my strong opinion that is the best way forward. Like, that is the US meta. By equipping your stealth planes with bombs, you can use their only real strength and their survivability to just YOLO the front line and kill what you need. Then Russia will have a dilemma whether they spend their money in the air to shoot down your planes or just to spot them in general, or on the ground to stop your advance. Because while all of this is happening, you're going to have other points. Both teams will have more points. And that's where I'm really thinking the United States has the advantage. I think the Abrams are the best tanks. I think the Strikers are amazing. And apart from some of the heavy sniper rifle, the ASVHKs, whatever they're called, you guys know what I'm talking about, for Russian Marines and some of those sniper teams in general, I think the US infantry is much better as well. It's just that if you allow the Russians to have air superiority, or if you allow them to have free reign with that artillery, which is overwhelming artillery, which is a subject for another day, but just, TLDR, overwhelming. Anybody that's seen the Russian decks, you guys will know what I'm talking about. And you know what? Just wait 2 months. You're going to find out anyway, because I doubt they change any of that. Then you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to have supplies. You're not going to have infantry. You're not going to have light vehicles, because it's going to get all artillery. And again, if they have the air, then they're going to hit you with the, anti-tank missiles or the ballistic missiles or the bombs. Don't forget the CAP 1500 exists too, or hell, maybe just straight up nuke you. So you now should understand that, from there, it's up to you to have fun, but you won't get to have it if you're playing against well-informed, well-coordinated enemies and you don't stop the snowball. So good luck. And that was an actual detailed explanation of the quote-unquote meta talk that we've been having for weeks, and you all know what I know now. If Russia is allowed to build up their AA net, the snowball begins to roll downhill. All they need are planes in the air to spot the U.S. stealth, and they can sit under that net with their artillery to then just completely pile drive you, because if you properly micro your artillery and they don't get spotted, direct line of sight, then you can't counter them, because it'll take too long to aim and your planes won't be able to get to them, as I already explained. If you still don't see, then that's fine. I very genuinely don't care, because at this point the devs see it, and that's all that matters. So I've done my part as a tester. If they don't want to change anything, that's also fine, because the gameplay involved here is still fun and engaging. Not everybody is going to know how to do this. As popular as this channel is, lack of a better word, if that's even the proper word, chances that any of you actually get a full team together that effectively puts this together is pretty rare. And if it happens, it's going to happen at the top, where it can be, kind of addressed differently with different little balance and things like that. But what this is not competitive, because it's not fair, and it for sure isn't balanced, of which I don't think they're prioritizing right now, which again, it's fine. It's better they focus on the new user experience first to bring in new players, in my opinion. Also, we can't forget there's other nations and other specs coming, so maybe they already have that stuff in mind. Maybe we're going to get the Growler. Maybe we're going to get... I'm assuming we're going to get the Growler. I'm assuming we're going to get Super Hornets. Maybe another F-35. We should get another F-35 to add to the list. Hell, if we get ships and they have like SM-6s and stuff like that, that's going to be crazy. But, let me know what you guys think. You're welcome for explaining this all to you, because it's not easy to learn or understand. This literally took me hundreds of hours altogether, gameplay obviously included, not to mention this topic in general. It's been weeks in the making. I've talked about it numerous times. Hopefully the visuals with this video help with that. So click all the buttons on the screen to support the channel. I also have a Patreon for something more direct. Otherwise, follow me on Twitch for streams on release, which is just a couple months away. Thank you very much for watching. Also, hope you have a nice day. See you guys.